you want a healthy amount of growth, and you want that to, again, be informed by what the community wants. And I think that's, the onus is on organizations like chambers and local governments to have that dialogue and to really understand deeply what it is that the community wants.
That's the voice of Stephanie Coleman, President and CEO of the Nashville Chamber. Nashville, of course, has had explosive growth in recent years, and we're chatting about the transition from being an it city of the last decade to a sustainable and livable hub for the next one. Welcome back to Inside America's Best Cities. I'm Amanda Ellis of Livability Media, your partner for telling your community's stories, attracting talent, and getting your place in front of the right people. At Livability, we highlight the nation's most vibrant, small and mid-sized cities to relocating talent and business decision makers so they can glean the insights they need. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome, Stephanie, to Inside America's Best Cities. We're so excited to chat with you.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So what I've really planned for our focus today is to talk about, it's really been an it place in the past several years, decade even, and just really talking through, writing that, how that's been positive, and how to make that sustainable in the coming years as well. So really appreciate you taking some time.
Sure.
Let's kick off. So again, that unprecedented growth that you've really seen, how is the chamber or partners, because we know it's never just the chamber alone, of course, managing that growth? I mean, yes, you still want to attract talent, but the right talent, making sure you can accommodate everybody and making sure you don't lose the character that makes a place cool. And Nashville obviously has so much. So I'd love to get you to speak to those a bit.
Yeah. So thank you for asking. That's a question that we think about every single day. If you look back over the past, honestly, more than a decade, we have seen this tremendous trajectory of economic growth in the Nashville region. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened due to intentional planning. A lot of that, from a chamber point of view, comes from our regional economic development plan, which is called Partnership. Now it's called Partnership 2030. And we've been doing that regional plan since 1990. So it's a public-private partnership where we look ahead to the next 5 years and we put intentional resource and effort into identifying what our priorities are for that next time frame. We can look back and see the impacts of that collaborative work over that time. I think that one thing I would point to in terms of what has made Nashville so successful is that we work really well across the region with our regional partners across public and private sector, and collaboration is kind of built into our DNA. But where we find ourselves today is that this tremendous economic growth and success that we've seen, which has translated into jobs, translated into population, GDP growth, so many benefits for the community, also comes with challenges. There are challenges to being a growing community, and those include things like affordability. That also includes housing, transportation, issues like workforce, childcare. So we really do find ourselves in a place now where we're paying very close attention to how we do protect, maintain, nurture that character that has made us who we are. And we know that if we don't pay attention to it, we could very well lose that special aspect of what makes us unique. And I would point specifically to this idea that Nashville is known as Music City, that we have this incredible creative class and creative brand that has drawn people here and has kept people here for decades. And we also know that as the affordability pressures rise, it becomes more difficult for creative individuals to move here or to stay here. So it's top of mind every single day.
Right. And that's such a good point, too, about people in that field and making sure that they can also enjoy and be close to the main parts of the city that you would want to be. Thinking about that in a different way than other areas might, who don't have as big of a population of people engaged in that space.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on Partnership 2030 a little bit already, which I did want to talk a little bit more about in particular. So, and say the year again that initiated?
1990.
So I'm sure that there's been a big shift in what some of those focuses were then versus now. So would love to hear a couple of those, as well as maybe some in just this latest kind of 5-year iteration you're moving into. Like what's different about this campaign and the priorities maybe than the last one?
Sure. So going all the way back 35 plus years ago, when partnership was created, it was really created around the idea that we needed a deliberate plan for recruiting jobs, job creation. That has remained a foundational part of our economic development strategy ever since those first years. But what's evolved over time is that employers now make decisions based on where the talent is, and people make decisions based on a place that is livable, a place where they can find opportunities, a place that's good to raise a family, where there's educational institutions. And so there's a lot of aspects of what goes into making a community or ensuring a community is livable. But that ultimately is how we've seen the plan evolve over that 35 years to thinking about quality of life, thinking about workforce, not just job creation, although that still is a key component. In the current plan that we're just wrapping up, so we're in the 5th year of our current plan, about to launch this next in July, we really focused on those 3 areas that I mentioned: job creation, workforce, and livability. As you look ahead to the next 5 years, there's a few things that stand out that really came about directly from the business community. They let us know what was on their minds, what they felt like we should be focusing our attention, our resources, our staff capacity, our volunteer leadership on. One of those areas we already talked about, which is community character. It's that idea that we need to make sure that we are protecting, nurturing, growing what makes us unique as a region. So a big part of that is our Music City brand, our creativity, that energy and vibrancy that comes from having that brand here in Nashville. Another part of it is this idea that our corporate community really believes in showing up with a mindset of service leadership, that they don't just write a check to help solve problems and solve challenges like the ones we've mentioned, but they lend their time, their expertise, their own leadership capacity to help be a part of those solutions. That's something that you don't see in every other market, and we want to make sure as new executives come to Nashville that they're really welcomed into that culture and that they understand that's how we get things done here. So those are pieces of community character. Another element that I'll mention in this upcoming plan is an emphasis when you look at our traditional economic development work and how we recruit and retain and expand companies. We typically will emphasize those industries that make up the foundation of our economy. So for the Nashville region, that is healthcare, corporate operations, music and entertainment, which fuels our hospitality industry, distribution and the logistics, and advanced manufacturing. Looking ahead to the next 5 years, rather than mixing up that group of industry sectors or adding an emerging sector, what we realized was we need to be focusing on the technology-enabled innovation within those sectors. So how can we attract more of that, tech component, the innovative component of those industries in order to make sure that we are prepared for the future, knowing that it's technology and innovation driving so much of the economy, not just in Nashville, in our state, but nationally and globally as well.
That makes so much sense, especially from the standpoint of, it's AI, everything now is kind of all you're hearing about, but how is that going to shift things? How do you get in front of it? And how's that, infiltrating all industries?
Exactly.
So thinking about workforce and talent, what do you feel like are the region's biggest challenges with that? And how does that maybe compare or contrast with some other markets?
So we briefly touched on affordability, but I would say a big part of us focusing on workforce is making sure that our talent is able to live here. Whether they are considering moving here or whether they have lived here for a long time, we want to make sure that they can find a place where they can thrive in Middle Tennessee. So affordability is a big piece of the equation. Another piece of the equation is making sure that our homegrown population who've grown up here in Middle Tennessee, that they have access to the skills needed for the jobs of the future. So that really requires a deep partnership between industry and our educational institutions to ensure that what is needed in the business world is being translated in that development of the talent pipeline. And then the third area, this is really that idea that, and it kind of goes back to what I just mentioned, but we want to make sure that the jobs that we are bringing in and creating and growing here, that they are accessible to everyone, that those opportunities are not just for newcomers, but those opportunities are for people who have been here a long time. And that not only requires creating clear career pathways, but also more of that awareness and exposure to what these opportunities are as early as possible. So think, even in elementary school, middle school, certainly in high school, making sure that we've got those deep connections with our employers here in town.
Right. I always think about kind of my own journey when I hear about that. And it's nice to see more of a focus because I think a lot of people felt really directionless coming out of high school, right? And kind of being, the only jobs you know about are maybe what your parents did.
Exactly.
That's
We're
it.
trying to change that by just offering more opportunities for students to learn about different career fields, again, as early as possible. But certainly what differentiates us is making sure that those elements that could be seen as a barrier for individuals, so affordability, I would also include transportation, being able to get around the city and the region, issues like childcare availability, the benefits cliff, where individuals might actually lose some of their public benefits if they take a raise or more hours. These are barriers that we've got to be really intentional about solving and lifting up and elevating into public awareness so that more of our Middle Tennessee residents can fully participate in the workforce.
Yeah. And I love the focus too on not just newcomers and bringing new people in, but people that have their roots here, because I think that's something, especially people that have been based in a certain area for a long time, are very sensitive to, right? You're like, oh yeah, we got to do everything for the new people. What about the old people?
Exactly. And I'll mention one other thing just because I earlier spoke to this idea of becoming a tech hub, the technology and innovation aspects. Because tech is really woven into every single industry. It's everything that we're doing. We're incorporating technology more and more day to day. But we know that if you look back over Nashville's history, in the earlier years, our tech workforce was largely in healthcare because that was our largest industry, and that's where you saw the bulk of what you consider traditional tech workers. That is beginning to change with the kind of influx into our community of some additional large employers in the tech field. So think Oracle, think Amazon, even some other longtime employers like Tractor Supply, Cat Financial are really emphasizing tech. And the benefit to that is if you are attracting talent here or you're wanting to keep talent here, they've got more options. So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket in one industry or one company. If they want to have a little bit more career flexibility, they've got some options for where they can be employed. So that's another thing that we've seen evolve here in Middle Tennessee over the years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like you want those options and not just to be tied to kind of one specific place, especially if you like the area. Like we were talking about that quality of life piece and people even prioritizing that sometimes nowadays over they kind of figure out the work part after
That's right.
they figure out where they want to live. You spoke a little bit already to collaboration, how important that is. How do you maintain that when you do have a lot of new players, new large brands moving into town and really seeing that growth, but also wanting to keep everyone on the same page?
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of being here at the Chamber. We've long been known as a convener where we bring people together to talk about some of the key issues that are on folks' minds here in Middle Tennessee. But more and more, beyond just convening and bringing people together, we are bringing the business community to the table when we're talking about all kinds of issues, many of those that I've already discussed. But it's really important to have this collaborative approach, but with a bias toward action. We know that if we're not producing results collectively, then we're just having conversation. So that can be a little difficult at times, right? Because you've got a lot of folks at the table who might be coming with different perspectives, different agendas, perhaps. And I think that the first thing you have to do is level set and build trust among the entities in the room. Certainly, if there are new leaders, we usually take that as an opportunity to welcome them in, to say, we want you at the table, we need you at the table, because your voice and your perspective is really critical. But you can't necessarily rush the process to build trust and build relationships. we know any circumstance that you might run into in life, certainly in business, if there's a reason that you need to call someone up, if you've already built that relationship, those conversations are a lot easier to have. So I would say that relationship piece it's the chamber's primary, it's how we do business. It's kind of our currency, if you will. We are connectors in the community, and I think that's just really important to continue to make sure that is the foundational aspect of how we get things done.
Right. Makes sense. Thinking about something I feel like is a little unique about the Nashville region is you've got this pretty significant urban core, right? And that has its own, set of challenges and issues, some of which we've already spoken to. But you've also, expanding outward, that's going to get more suburbs and even into some rural areas potentially. So what are the different needs and how do you balance making sure that you're attentive to both?
I think the benefit of our region is there's something for everyone, and that the Nashville kind of urban core supports the suburban and rural areas, and vice versa. They complement each other. And sometimes we have to remind people, just as an example, the tourism industry in Nashville really not only fuels the Nashville and Middle Tennessee economy, it fuels the entire state's economy. We are the number one tourism city in the state. I believe we brought in over $11 billion in 2024, and ultimately that equates to over $3,000 per household, where those households would have to make up that revenue for the city in other ways if it weren't for that tourism revenue, state and local taxes. So we really benefit as a community from being an attractive place for visitors. That's just one aspect of that urban, suburban, rural dynamic. Another aspect is we talked about housing. We know that there are areas of our region that make a lot of sense for denser corridors or transit-oriented development or zoning that is more conducive to having more people in a central location. And then there's other areas that, the community needs to be assured that they're going to be able to protect kind of more of that landscape and the natural landscape and the open spaces that also are a huge part of what makes Middle Tennessee beautiful and really speaks to our quality of life here. So there's always a balance that is important between those dynamics between different types of neighborhoods. And I think the most important thing is conversation with the community to understand what is it that the community wants? What is it that the community needs? To know that there are benefits that come from growth and development, and there are also challenges that come with growth and development. To have those open, honest conversations to say, does this community prioritize job opportunities in close proximity? Do they prioritize some additional services or restaurants or retail being close by? Or do they truly want to kind of keep that rural feel? But ultimately, I think it comes down to balance and communication.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And at the end of the day, even though that growth does have challenges and sometimes people who have maybe lived somewhere a long time seeing that change can be uncomfortable, but everywhere you want to be the place that's growing and that people want to be, not the opposite. That doesn't help anyone.
It doesn't really ever, a community doesn't ever really stay the same. And you want a healthy amount of growth, and you want that to, again, be informed by what the community wants. And I think that's, the onus is on organizations like chambers and local governments to have that dialogue and to really understand deeply what it is that the community wants.
Right. And being able to stay ahead of and be intentional about change, not just always reacting to it, which I think is, like a lot of these things, also a good life metaphor.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yes.
I did want to have you speak to, I know that your career has largely been at the chamber, moving through some different roles over time, which I feel like you don't see that much in this space, kind of that tenure in one community and with one organization. So would love to hear about how you've seen Nashville and what chambers are doing in general evolve over that time.
Yeah, so I started at the chamber in 2008, and it's interesting looking back at that time because we were just going into the Great Recession. So a very different environment than what we've had over the past few decades, really. So that at that time, we shifted our focus to supporting businesses that were really struggling. And a lot of those were small businesses. I remember we brought our entire staff together and we looked at what suite of programs we could produce for small businesses in particular. At that time, I was leading our communications team. Since then, I have moved into a number of different roles at the chamber. I think for me, it gives me a really good perspective on how all the pieces of an organization like ours fit together. I know, a lot of our team members here, I've kind of walked in their shoes. I know what they're experiencing day to day. But it also gave me a chance to build relationships with different types of stakeholders, with our members, our investors, sponsors, small businesses, large corporations, government, nonprofit, etc. And all of that has been really beneficial in the role that I'm in today. I'll say one thing about the evolution of Nashville and the evolution of the chamber. So the one thing about Nashville, if you look back to the Great Recession, the boom period, which kind of came after the 2010 flood. So then we had this boom period. And then as we've been in this rapid economic growth trajectory, we've still run into some additional challenges that we've had to address, like the global pandemic or the Second Avenue bombing that occurred in 2020, or tornadoes, or this most recent ice storm. Every step of the way, I'm always amazed by how resilient Nashville is, how much you see neighbors helping neighbors, you see businesses leaning in and helping each other as well as their neighbors. It truly is a community where people will jump right in to help out. And we always bounce back stronger than we were before. I've just seen that over and over and over again. And I think that resiliency is something that's baked into who we are. From a chamber standpoint, again, we've long been that connector. We've had great relationships with the public sector, with the nonprofit sector, with philanthropy. I do think more and more, though, we've shifted from what I would call more of a convening role to being a key player and helping to drive resource, strategy, and action to help with some of these more complex challenges that we're facing today as we've seen this rapid growth. So like housing, complex, workforce,
Right.
transportation, all of these issues require not just one entity, but multiple entities coming together. So I think we have seen the need for our work to be elevated to a new level of sophistication in order to meet the demands of Nashville today and the next chapter of Nashville's future 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of what our field as a whole in economic development and chamber world has really shifted. Like you said, to not just being the convener, but having a seat at the table too, and being the hub for trying to, I guess, solve is the wrong word because a lot of these challenges, like we said, there's not like a lever you can pull, unfortunately, maybe. But yeah, really having your hands in a lot of those bigger picture things that maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago were not so much the case.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, we always move into a closer fun question, but before we get to that, anything else you'd like to add on this topic or anything else you'd like to share with some of your peers?
I would just say, I think since I've been in the role as CEO just over a year, so I like to tell people I'm not new anymore. I don't get to be
You passed the year mark, so.
right. But this is kind of more of a personal reflection, but really thinking about the past year, I've been humbled by how supportive the community has been of me, how supportive they've been of the chamber under new leadership after 18 years. We already had a really strong foundation that we were building off of, but I think that being a part of this incredible growing community of Nashville, where we don't want to take for granted how incredible this community is and the opportunities that lie ahead of us, even though we have challenges to address. To me, it's just been this incredible experience of being humbled by the community that we exist in. So I want to give a shout out to all of those who lift up and support each other and truly do reach out and check in. And again, I communicate directly with so many people on a daily basis, as do other chamber staff members. And I know that's the case across sectors. So really a kind of a beautiful reflection on who we are as a community.
Yeah. That's amazing. And a cool seat, front row seat that you get to have to that in your position. So the fun question, and I feel like this is going to be a little harder for you than for some of our guests. So you, of course, are based in Nashville. So the fun question is, if someone were visiting for the first time, what would you tell them that they definitely had to do, but maybe something that wouldn't be like the first thing that would pop up if they Googled it?
Let's see.
And Nashville's hard because so many restaurants now, so many.
There's so many restaurants and so much to do all the time. There's incredible entertainment every night of the week, every day of the week. I mean, obviously music is the core, so they would have to go see music somewhere. But something that they may not expect would be, this is a personal favorite of mine, but I just love that we have this incredible park system in Nashville. We have many, many parks in Nashville. One of the larger ones is Percy Warner and Edwin Warner, which is right next to Percy Warner. I think if it was someone visiting who has any inclination toward the outdoors or hiking or walking or riding bikes, to be able to point them just a few miles down the street to experience this beautiful area and get that fresh air would be something I would want to make sure they experience while they're here.
Love that. Well, thank you so much. This was a special interview for me too, being a Tennessean. And even though I'm a Chattanoogan at heart, I'm a Belmont alum and have done a lot of back and forth with Nashville. Of course, Livability is based in Franklin, and we have a really special state. And I think you've got a really special region. So I really appreciate you taking some time to share.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This has been a real treat.
Thanks for listening to the Livability Podcast, where we take you inside America's best cities. At Livability, we highlight the unsung awesomeness of small and mid-sized cities across the country. We also partner with communities to reach their target companies and potential residents through digital content and print magazine programs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review this show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also learn more about us at livabilitymedia.com. Have an idea for an upcoming episode? Email me at aellis@livability.com. Until next time, from Livability, I'm Amanda Ellis, sharing the stories of America's most promising places.